Hey everybody, it's Professor Diffley. This is Criminal Justice Ethics, video 3 for Chapter 6. So we are still on explanations for police corruption. Number 2 is argued it is, oops, sorry, didn't mean to go back there. So the first one was individual officers. We just talked about that. The departmental problems. So this is the second one, that if corruption cannot be explained alone in terms of few bad apples, then it's something else, right? It's something bigger. It's the barrel itself. This is the deviant police subculture hypothesis. Argue is that there is a subculture within the police, or can be, in these departments where there are problems. Where you have deviants. Similar officers have same outlook regardless of their regarding their commitment to their duty, and feel slighted by superiors, society, other things. Maybe they are just a bad folks together and they're working together. So there's a subculture of it. There's also the explanation, maybe the theory of the blue wall signs, that even the good cops, which there's far more of them than the bad ones, and that's clear, that even those good ones keep their code of silence, and that is a problem, because by not, again, I use the term ratting out here because that's what people use, but what's the difference between ratting someone out and a whistleblower, right? Whistleblower is someone who speaks up about bad actions, and we usually respect them, and we want them to do it. We have laws that protect them, to protect people. But then there's often it's referred to as ratting, as it's again as a rat. No one wants to be compared to a rat. It's a very interesting concept of what is different. Why are they perceived so different there? So this is the argument that even the good cops help this along. What's the, I'm paraphrasing here, but the famous lines is, it only takes, a few good men to stay silent to allow evil to flourish, sort of thing. For a few good people to stay silent to allow bad to flourish, is sort of the idea. Other ones, that it's not just the department, but it's more, right? It's external. Can make government actions can make honest policing difficult. One idea focuses on vices. Many, these are laws that many do not want to enforce these laws. So these are cops that don't want to necessarily enforce some of the laws. Not that this is because there's no complaint. There's no actual person getting harmed here. So they see it as as a waste of their time. In some ways, cops are limited. It becomes a question of what do I go after? The murderer, the violent criminal, the rapist, that sort of thing, or someone for a vice crime, or a public nuisance crime, that sort of thing. And so these cops are then tempted to look away. But this is going to be the problem, and this goes into, and make sure you look at the videos on this, on the incrementalism, or as I call it, the slippery slope, is that slope, once you start looking away, maybe you can go further, right? Maybe you look the other way on this one. You'll start looking the other way on other issues, or maybe now that you're willing to look away, maybe start trying to get bribes to do that. So some say this is lack of government oversight of police, and that's been a topic in Springfield for many years, actually, but recently too, about should there be civilian citizen oversight of police forces? Should there be more citizen boards and that? And there's arguments both for and against in many ways. But there's also political climate in locales. Take it this way: if the city government's corrupt and the police aren't, maybe it starts to trickle its way in there. If you see superiors being corrupt, then it sort of gives people the green light. That's another argument. So these are the three major main explanations for police corruption. So how do you combat that? Some of it, the argument is more transparency regarding complaints against the police, so we can know what they're doing, and if the people know, they can be held accountable. I think this is a big one. Better background checks on cadets. Because, how do these people make it through if you have all these steps in place that weed out the unethical and bad, corrupt police? It's different types. So better here could also mean different, right? Tests will only tell you so much. There should be other ways, and maybe more in depth. But that's one of the arguments, and you hear that from a lot of the police academies as well. Recurring training and ethical education. So a lot of times is for a while there wasn't even the requirement of this ethics class in the program. Here, often you'll get a crash course of it at in the academy or that, but then nothing else, and that is usually the extent of the ethical education. And as you know, a lot of the theories that we've talked about here, and over time, say that people need training in this. Right, we're not born ethical or unethical; we learn, and so we need it. The concept of the civilian review board is in there too. Again, the pros and cons of it. It lets the people have a say, but one of it is these people might not have a full understanding of what it is to be a police officer and all the ins and outs, and so they're not going to judge things correctly. Or one of the other arguments I've often heard is the people who are going to sit on these are people who have a grudge against the police anyway, and so they're going to be looking for it. But that's a debate for another day. But these are just some of the ideas. We're not really going to look at whether or not these are the best, but these are some that have been floated and seen. Better oversight by experts rather than political appointees. Overseeing police departments, right? So sometimes if the if you have a corrupt, this is what I was talking about before, external things. You have a corrupt city official, government official, say a mayor, and he appoints his person to overlook and oversee the police. Well, he's going to maybe likely corrupt as well. Maybe get rid of those crimes that the cops aren't really focusing on anyway. And this is something that's been proven true in other areas. If you go back to Prohibition days, why did it seem like all of the police and judges in Chicago were in bed with the mob and helping the bootleggers and the moonshiners and all that? One of the argues that they were barely making enough to get by, to make ends meet, the police, and so they almost out of necessity. They have hard jobs, incredibly hard jobs, working long hours, very dangerous, and can pay nothing. And so they'll be more tempted to take. They'll feel underappreciated, but more just to try to get by. They're going to be more willing to accept bribes or extort people. So maybe that's one way, right? Is that and usually too, the argument is if you have better pay, promotional opportunities, that sort of thing. You can be more selective. You're going to get more applicants, so you can weed out some people. The other promotional opportunities, it seems that not often, but in enough cases, you'll get officers who argue that they're, or at least you'll find out, not argue, but you'll find out that they part of their reasoning for doing the things they did is they have a grudge against someone, right? They got passed up, they feel they're being mistreated, and so now they lash out. So those are some of the arguments there. So the codes of ethics, again, you can see these in the text there. So what are codes of ethics? They're designed to promote thoughtful and professional conduct. They do not account for every possible situation. That is impossible for not just this field, but any field. So what do? They give us a mechanism to enhance professionalism, reduce corruption. They're not meant to account for everything, as I just said. They're designed to promote thoughtful and professional conduct. They create a framework, give us a general guidelines, right? And then so you may have a case where it fits what it says in the code perfectly. Other cases, you might get a situation where it's similar. And so that's how you use it, right? Is try to apply them in that way. They rely on principles, right? And so if you follow these principles, again, this is very much virtue ethics. If you do good and practice doing good, you will be a virtuous, ethical person. And that's kind of again, what we're getting here. Statements of principles is important. Know the difference between statements of principles and requirements. Principles are aspirational and set out ideals, right? Meant to guide our decisions. These are values in that. Sets of requirements are this is what you should, not you shall do, right? These are the same as statutes. These are the same as laws, right? This is your duty. Most codes are a little bit of a mix of both of these. It's interesting. Code of ethics have only been focused on for law enforcement. Lawyers, others have had them for a long time. Most fields have them. It's been hard. Why don't we have so few code of ethics in police work? Why you only get them now? It's not professionalized in the same way. There's no, like for a bar, to be a lawyer, you have to be part of the bar. And so there's a whole bar association that oversees all the attorneys in a state. So they can have that. But the thing in Massachusetts, how many different police departments there are, there's not one united body overseeing them. And also, there's no uniformity and lack of education in many ways throughout the United States on ethics, and also there's no lateral career mobility, right? I can pass the bar and become a member of the bar in another state, and the rules are generally the same, and I can keep my rank, that sort of thing. I'm not going to go down. That's not true there. Lack of a national, even as I said, there's no nothing similar. Lack of all this. Why is this a problem? it tends to create often is that people become loyal to their employer rather than to the profession, right? And that's a problem. They're not loyal. They're loyal to their department or their boss, not the of being a protector, of a defender, a peacekeeper, a police officer, right? I think of the Hippocratic Oath. Doesn't matter if you're a doctor. Your oath is I shall not do any harm, right? Do not do any harm. That is the loyalty to the profession, right? Doctors are there to help, not hurt people. The loyalty is to the client, to your patient, not to your hospital that you work for or whatever. So the code of ethics can take, again, the form of an oath or a mission statement. Police officers and law enforcement in general have a oath, and it sets out your duty. That is your code of ethics. It has been more that we've spread it out over times, right? Not just the oath, but then fleshed it out, I should say, in more. Fundamental duties: serve the community, safeguard life and property, protect the innocent, the weak against oppression, the innocent against deception. That doesn't mean you got to protect them from lies, but that is more of like, people trying to scams, that sort of thing. Weak against oppression or intimidation. Peaceful, protect the peaceful against the violent and disorder, and respect the rights and liberties of all. Equality and justice. So, I mean, this is obviously what we want. These are our ideals for any law enforcement officer or anybody with power, a public official over power over others and the public. Private life, this is important too, and this has come from the IACP. You can see I've sort of rewritten the code here and broken it into constituent parts. Their private life, keep it unsullied as an example of all. They should obey the law and regulations. Why is this important? And this is very important for this field and all the ones. Your private life, it's not just when you're on the clock. Your 9 to 5 shift. That's midnight. That's not what you're. When you just have to be ethical, you should be all the time. If you're unethical and a criminal on your side, outside of the job. And, we can draw enough inference to figure that you're probably not going to be following the rules on the job, too. But, right, you're models for it. And so this is really, you're supposed to practice what you preach. You can't, I know we ask children this all the time, do as I say, not as I do. But this means you should do as you do, too, here. Don't bring discredit. That's the problem. Again, you reflect on your public figures, the face of the government, face of the criminal justice system. People look at you, what you did, and apply it to others and to the whole thing. So don't bring discredit to it. I mean, this is true in any profession, especially work for the state or any company, right? People are fired all the time. We see this. Like someone says some bad comments or things like that on TV. They're on TV. They lose their job. People claim that's an attack on freedom of speech. It's not, because it's not the government going after you. It is the employer, right? We all have morality clauses in contracts and jobs. Companies can't get rid of people that make their company look bad. Same for the police or any of the others. So keep these separate. Do not bring in personal feelings. Your life, your private life and job separate. Don't bring in your personal feelings, your prejudice, beliefs, aspirations, animosities, or friendships, right? You be a professional means to be a professional. Keep boundaries, true boundaries, right? Like one way to avoid this, I know where I grew up in Suffolk County, New York. The police department there has a rule where, and I saw family and friends had this. When you get a promotion, they'll move you around different departments. The rule was you shouldn't be patrolling in the area you live or where your family is, but especially where you live. Why? Well, it could be dangerous to the police officer, right? But more is all these things. They're going to know so much about the people around there. It's going to be hard to keep these prejudices. And the prejudice could be good, right? You're biased towards that person. Not just prejudice meaning you dislike someone, but also a bias for someone, right? Or against a prejudice, one way or the other. They don't assign you to those places. If they say you have to be assigned there for a little bit, I know this happened with a family member. For the 6 months he had to be there after a promotion, they didn't have him out on the streets, right, doing other jobs, just so he wouldn't have to interact with people and be faced with all these things. Because we all know, and you're going to find this out if this is the field you go into, you pull over a buddy or something like that, they're going to want special treatment. Friends, it's best to just avoid those situations altogether, if possible, because you're supposed to treat them as you would anybody else. And we know how difficult that can be. Not just for the officer, but for the people to understand that you're dealing with. You see that all the time. All right, we will pick up with this in lecture 4. Be back in a sec.